Hello, I'm Brian Balke from Hypnosis Rising, welcoming you as our exploration of Christotherapy turns to the challenge of therapeutic strategy. In considering the claims made in our last lecture, many clinicians and members of the public are surprised, if not skeptical or even outraged, regarding the wide range of our claims. What unites those applications, however, is the influence of expectations. As Christotherapists, we soften and redirect expectations, encouraging the brain to allocate resources for healing and growth, whether physical, mental, or spiritual. Practitioners of trance-active therapy often celebrate their miracle cures, cases in which a single inspired suggestion relieved a lifetime of suffering. As Christotherapists, however, our goal extends beyond relief to prevention and empowerment. We can accomplish that goal only if we change the relationship of the client to themselves. We need to persuade them that they have agency to change their condition. In this 5-part series, we will examine how that goal, persuasion for agency, informs therapeutic strategy. We have hinted at certain aspects of this challenge in our lecture on learning and in our survey of mental states when we outlined the session as an elicitation sequence. Neither of these, however, give us guidance in the application of specific therapeutic techniques. To illustrate, we know that we must cultivate depth to access deeper layers of expectation. To this end, we have rigidity challenges, including fractionation and descent imagery, all of which can be used as deepeners. Each deepener has its unique character. It heightens communication between certain parts of the personality. The rigidity challenge, for example, helps to soften the link between emotion and the body. The renewed flexibility of the body can translate to behavioral flexibility. Alternatively, a descent deepener focuses conscious attention on specific skills and virtues in the conscious mind. In awakening the client's agency, the two deepeners serve different purposes. In this series, persuasion of agency will be used to detail the session structure, with particular attention paid to the trance work. This framework will be illustrated in later lectures on specific therapeutic applications. As we detail core trance techniques, we will reveal how they empower the client for agency. This perspective is essential in complex therapies when the trance work exposes details hidden from view during the pre-trance dialogue, leading us into uncharted waters. In this lecture, we begin our discussion with the psychology of persuasion. As all persuasion influences behavior, we tie that back to our prior principles for change, accommodation, and elicitation. A client's inability to control their behavior reflects attitudes instilled by experience. Their attitudes limit their strategies for relating to reality. In other words, it constrains their personality. In our second lecture, we will offer perspectives that help the client orient themselves as they explore their personality. As that landscape is revealed, that insight helps them design more effective responses. Harkening back to our lecture on learning, responsiveness can also be built around stories, which have the advantage of allowing our intimates to align themselves with our goals or our behaviors. In our third session, we will focus on universal narratives of crisis. Our fourth lecture will focus on a narrative of personal, social, and spiritual integration, our heuristic path. Given these insights, we must be aware that most clients come to us with transactional goals. Our models and frameworks allow us to interpret their frustrations as imbalances of the personality. In some cases, we hold those insights in reserve until clients have established faith in their agency. In the concluding lecture of this series, we will outline a therapeutic strategy that addresses immediate goals in a context that orients the client towards future growth. This strategy of facilitation organizes the insights obtained in waking dialogue for use in the trance work. So, if our job is to persuade people that they can change, how do we go about persuading them? From our lecture on learning, we recall why change is hard. Our behaviors are consistent because they correspond with our experience. As we will see in our discussion of narratives, an unpredictable environment stunts the personality. Conversely, in a predictable environment, we optimize our behaviors, leaving resources available for exploration and growth. Our clients often seek therapy because changes in the environment undermine their deepest behaviors. Those environmental changes may be either beneficial or harmful to their well-being. For example, people who have never known kindness may come to therapy to learn how to accept that gift when it is offered by a lover. This is the stage of confrontation. The client recognizes that to achieve a desired outcome, they must change. Before reaching the point of confrontation, however, two prior steps occur. Because our expectations color our perceptions, we may have trouble even recognizing that experience has changed. When awareness does arise, we initially try to assimilate the experience, to discount or deny its significance. Psychologically, we seek to preserve our existing behaviors until the costs of our resistance become too high. Should this occur, we arrive at the point of confrontation. Therapy begins with reformulation of the client's expectations. They might learn new ways of analyzing experience, allowing them to see differences that previously were ignored. This new insight empowers them to reap benefits in all situations. Conversely, they might learn to weigh costs and benefits to be more selective in choosing what experiences to pursue. Most painfully, they may conclude that their behavior controls their experience in a self-reinforcing and self-limiting cycle. When the client has concluded a phase of accommodation, they will seek to apply their lessons with new behaviors. We seek to ensure that they think seriously about the efficacy of the changes. Trance is an invaluable aid in this regard, ensuring that the physical and spiritual side effects are not discounted. We cannot, of course, control all aspects of the client's experience, and so the behavioral changes are always provisional. Through the course of therapy, we evaluate the lessons of experience, refining both expectations and behaviors. In persuading clients of their agency, of the potential for change within them, we must resolve three sources of resistance. The first is behavioral resistance. Does the client believe that changing their behavior will lead to greater fulfillment? Because they have sought us out, we might assume that this is satisfying. However, we must be mindful of the layered defenses revealed as the onion peels, to be discussed in the next slide. As each layer is exposed, the client will experience disruptions that will progress through assimilation to accommodation. Our role is to ease that transition, to lay the foundations for accommodation. How does this transpire in therapy? It may be as simple as musing, there seems to be a deeper issue here, or as subtle as using the stages of development to anticipate a gap in the personality left by a childhood trauma. Sometimes these insights are shared immediately. Sometimes professional judgment causes us to withhold an insight until the client requests guidance. The principle of replacement, to be described shortly, guides our judgment. The second source of resistance is social norms. While prior to therapy, clients may not articulate the gaps between their expectations and experience, they will intuitively embed themselves in relationships that compensate for their self-limiting behaviors. This often manifests as support for proxies, such as authoritarian spouses or leaders, who promise to provide for the client. In such cases, growth toward independence will be resisted by the authority. This is a common driver of early termination of therapy. Part of therapy, then, is to prepare the client to diffuse such resistance. In some cases, the client enters therapy already committed to a break with dependency. In general, an accountability partner is a powerful aid, creating social pressure to continue with the work and facilitating entry into a community that will support change. One example of an accountability partner is the 12-step sponsor. The final source of resistance is anomie or apathy, the client's conviction that they lack the power to change themselves. In general, trance-active therapies counter this conviction by inducing profound relaxation using nothing but words. If relaxation is achieved by nothing more than a good talking to, then certainly the client can learn to do that. Once that is learned, we cultivate awareness of triggers that drive anxiety and build behaviors that diffuse or avoid those triggers. Many clients face the constraints of time and money. Our response is that even in a few sessions, we can change the way that they relate to themselves. Once that is in place, they have the rest of their lives to apply that skill in the search for fulfillment. Our assessment of resistance is threaded through the pre-trance dialogue. It may be stated explicitly or be inferred from abreactions, such as a grimace or shift in posture, when explaining how others have struggled with the same problem, i.e. during normalization. The wording "a phase of accommodation" informs the therapeutic metaphor of peeling the onion. Naturally, the client will first confront expectations at the periphery of their personality. This informs their stated presenting issue. For example, their habit of hair pulling may mask a desire to scream at an unimpressive partner. A measure of our skill in persuasion is that clients consistently deepen their goals during an investigation in the first session. This is an implicit recognition of faith that they have found a trustworthy witness to their struggle. Please take a moment to recognize the significance of the term witness, whether immediately through our affirmation of their character or over the course of time as therapy builds confidence in their ability to learn and grow. It is self-confidence that inspires the client to address more profound behavioral changes. The presence of hidden self-limiting beliefs may be revealed as we seek to clarify the client's relationship to their presenting issue. The age of onset links to our developmental narratives. Exploring the practical, emotional, and moral dimensions of the behavior probes the maturity of the client's relationship to themselves and society. Normalization, which seeks to establish precedents for therapeutic success, can allow the client to speak more freely by projecting their concern onto an abstract other. In this discussion, we monitor for tells that indicate deeper levels of conflict. These can manifest physically as grimaces, twinges, and spacing out. More subtly, narrative breaks, such as non sequiturs and topical jumps, indicate that an expectation has arisen that the client is not ready to confront. Peeling the onion is a critical concern. The general prescription is never remove a symptom until a replacement is in place. We can illustrate this with a habit such as hair pulling. Pulling hair repetitively causes minor irritation that triggers the release of endorphins in the brain, chemicals that suppress pain and calm fears of social rejection. Such self-soothing is often held over from a traumatic childhood. Immediate suppression of the habit, therefore, may amplify anxiety. Those among us confronted with oppressive experiences must evolve behaviors that seem inefficient to people who expect support from their intimates. As that disconnect is revealed, the survival invents compensatory behaviors to hide their social discomfort. Among these, codependency masks the disruption created by their tormentor. Criminality exploits the naivete of trusting intimates. Authoritarianism seeks to punish society for failing to shield victims from harm. These are extreme cases offered to illustrate the point that the issue that brings the client to therapy may be the tip of an iceberg of attitudes that organized our lifestyle. If we remove the symptom without providing an effective replacement, they are thrown into a demoralizing whirlpool of disruptions. To avoid this, we must offer a socially acceptable replacement for their behavior, establishing a precedent for further change. What qualifies as a replacement? Some encourage rhythmic tapping or a reassuring mantra as a replacement before ending a habit. In Christotherapy, we may offer these as intermediate steps, but ultimately the replacement will be a confident assertion of the client's agency in developing more responsive behaviors. Trust in the self is the universal replacement for protective behavior patterns. In our discussion of mental states, we emphasize that therapy is a relationship in which our witness supports the client's self-realization. Focusing now on agency, each session uses elicitation to build the client's confidence in their ability to manage their mental state. Even elicitation of trance, often experienced at first as a reluctant surrender to our intermediation, becomes self-actuated, either through mastery of auto-hypnosis or by a spontaneous transition to trance when the subconscious, monitoring our dialogue, decides that it wants to integrate an insight. In guiding the client through calming and into alliance, we create the conditions for receptivity to confrontation during engagement. Self-discovery and psychoeducation serve to persuade the client of their agency for change. Facilitation guides the client beyond accommodation into integration, accomplishing in 30 minutes what might otherwise require months or years. Assessment encourages the client to reflect upon the internal support awoken in trance as evidence of their agency. And in commitment, we prepare the client to affirm that agency in waking activity. In elaborating therapy in each area of application, we will detail the content for engagement and map the information obtained in self-discovery to the specific techniques applied in facilitation. This lecture considered persuasion as it applies to behavior change through accommodation. Our role as therapists is to facilitate growth by encouraging confrontation with self-limiting expectations, followed by coaching that supports the client as they explore new behaviors. We have introduced peeling the onion and replacement as guiding principles for pacing change. Too much change, too fast, can be disorienting. During dialogue, reactions and abrupt topical shifts can indicate that the client's presenting concern is in fact a defensive symptom. Finally, in a reprise of the session structure, we emphasized how each step facilitates the client's growth to self-realization. We give them encouraging words. Once those formulas are learned, they take root in dreams, stimulating the spontaneous development of new choices that surface unexpectedly in waking life. The client awakens one day to the realization that they are their own guru.